am so excited to introduce our speakers for today. We've been working to bring you top-notch speakers for each of these leaders gatherings, and today is no exception. Dana and Bridget are both natives of Chicago. Dana is an ordained minister and holds a Master of Arts in Urban Ministry from Trinity Evangelical Divinity School. He served as the executive director for Sunshine Gospel Ministry in Chicago and as the executive director and COO of Kids Across America camps. Y'all are probably very familiar with KAA in Branson, Missouri. Dana is a sought-out church and conference speaker. He is recognized as a keynote speaker and has served on numerous boards. He was named executive director for the Forge for Families in our city in 3rd Ward in January 2014. His wife, Bridget, also holds a Master's of Arts degree in Urban Ministry from Trinity Evangelical Divinity School and has been involved in ministry for more than 25 years. She is a contributing devotional writer for the Crossway Publishers Urban Bible and is a frequent speaker at retreats, seminars, and conferences. In 2015, she was awarded the Louis C. Ray Community Service Award by HREA for her work in the community. She currently serves as the program director at the Forge, and we are so honored to have you both today. So everyone, please welcome Dana and Bridget Thomas.
Well, thanks again for having us. Big fans of Loving Houston, have known about the work since we got here, met Marilyn early on. So I love that you guys are just big advocates of encouraging the church. Bridget and I would love to just jump right into this. And, you know, when we look at the reality of what CCD brings to the body of Christ and what it offers to the church in particular, the premise would be, I would argue, that it comes right out of Mark 12:30. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and your neighbors yourself would be the argument that many of us who practice this CCD model would say is a strong biblical mandate for why we approach ministering to people in this kind of way. Now, in my mind, this is common thinking. We don't always think through it, but to love your neighbor as yourself is very similar to a parent loving a child. I have 3 children, they're all grown now, but nobody had to coach me in loving my children holistically. Of course, every parent that's a Christ follower wants their child to come to know Christ. That's huge, them having a salvific experience. But our love for them doesn't stop there. We're always concerned with more than just their spiritual formation. We're concerned with their academic development. We're concerned with their character. We're concerned with their physical development. That's why we take them to the doctor. And we're concerned with them emotionally. We're concerned with the whole person. So the premise of ministering to people through CCD has us looking at the person holistically and not just being concerned with their spiritual formation, whether they know Christ when we meet them or whether they come to know Christ through us. We're always looking to be a vehicle to help them grow and mature holistically. And I think that's a big common missed piece, but it's a very common thing if you stop and think about the average Christian parent. Because I, as a parent, always was on my kids about developing themselves, mainly because I wanted them to develop their capacity that God had given them, not because I wanted them to do anything that would benefit me in their future. But I knew that God had placed in them some things that required them to develop as a student, for example, academically. So the basis of that whole thing goes back into that. So all of us are keenly aware of reconciliation being very important for us as Christ followers as we engage people. We are all familiar with the premise of being given the ministry of reconciliation, where God uses you and I, who have been reconciled ourselves, to be instruments of reconciling people back to him. But I would also say, and I didn't try to put everything in the slide, that reconciliation is not only vertical, where it's just between a person in God, but there is also a horizontal component to this, where we play a role in helping people reconcile to other people, and not just when relationships are broken. And so this reconciliation ministry is going multiple ways. It's going vertically and horizontally, and we get to play a role in helping people. And I would come back and say, that's a part of that being concerned with a person holistically, where I'm looking at them and their development. The picture of the Good Samaritan just stood out to me because it is the picture of what does it look like? What does it look like for people who may not be in relationship with somebody to actually, in a tangible way, love them in a way that speaks love to them? We all familiar with the story of the Good Samaritan, and I won't jump into it, but the picture is clear that it wasn't just about saying that I love somebody. It was clearly something that was done. The distinction that Jesus was pointing out between the characters in this story was the actions or the inactions of some people who was loving, who might not have been loving their neighbors themselves, where another person who was the least likely person was the person who did it. So it is something that's visible, and it's something that comes and it speaks to the people who are usually reached out to in a model like ours are people who might be on the margins in some form or fashion, but they can recognize when people care about them, when they're not just an object of, I just want to check the box, or I want to get this done, or I'm just wanting you, in the case of a ministry like ours, or in the case of the churches that's on the call, I just want you to know Jesus, but I'm not concerned about you. The Good Samaritan was concerned about that person. And I think that picture is a prime example of what it looks like to love somebody as yourself. Now, in this point, one of the things that I didn't put in the slide that I'll just mention, anytime I read 1 Corinthians 13, and I read it over and over for my own sake, and when it starts talking about what does love look like, it's the most common or familiar reference passage in scripture that we see on love. It is all these words that are actions. It is not something that's just a concept. It is something that is visibly manifest to somebody. To be patient, that really stands out when you start talking about working with some people under some dynamics where they may need patience being demonstrated because the reality of the challenges that they come with or the brokenness that they come with may require us to be able to be slow and patient with them to see growth, if you will, and not be discouraged and sometimes quick to want to discard them because you don't see the change you hope to see as quickly. I'll stop there and just say that this is something that can be seen. And the person that is on the inside of being, I would call them the end user, can recognize this relationship dynamic between us and them.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in and we'll hit this a little bit heavier later on, but the Good Samaritan in the development piece shows this idea of having compassion, but seeing a real need and meeting the need that exists, um, not a perceived need, not a need that you feel like they need, but really understanding what that person needs and moving past meeting it, but enabling that person to move to a place of health, getting that person to a place of health. The Samaritan literally took the person, bandaged his wound, took him to a place where he could be made whole so that that person could then get healing and move on and be a productive citizen in society. And so I want to just talk a little bit about the realities of CCD, that development piece being very connected to the realities of the scriptures saying that we as humanity, even when humanity is not in relationship with Jesus, Humanity is the image bearer of God. We are all the imago Dei of, of God, of the God of the universe. And therefore, because we are created in his image and in his likeness, we all, no matter what your ethnicity is, no matter what your background is, no matter what your socioeconomic status is, we all have intrinsic value. We all have intrinsic worth. And the development piece of CC, the Christian community development concept, that development piece says, then because we are image bearers, we then affirm, as we are developing people, we affirm the inherent dignity of mankind, mankind that was created in the image of God, mankind that bear his image. So we esteem every person as having value, worth, and potential. Literally, everyone has something to offer. The poor person has something to offer. The rich person has something to offer. The beggar on the street has something to offer because we are God's image bearers. And so that development piece is very much, if we miss that piece in development, we will, I think, cripple and enable people because we don't see their intrinsic value and worth and need to give back and to be a contributor to society.
And I would add the other reality of missing the fact that all are made in the image and likeness of God is that sometimes in people's brokenness and people's limitations, even in people's birth defects, if you will, where they may have limited capacities, mental challenges, physical challenges, we minimize the reality of how God might already be at work in that person. And we could miss what they have to contribute to an environment because we have not added value to them. We tend to add value to certain things. Certainly, we tend to add value to the things that society have affirmed over the years. And so when you're talking about affirming that, we really are talking about certain aspects of CCD is really mindful of the place of empowerment. One of the realities that I've always wrestled with is that work is something that was given by God before the fall. And when we remember that work is a gift from God, that it was not something that came as a result of the fall, that it's not intended to punish, but it was intended to bless, then it was intended for all mankind. And so we look at work, as you see in Genesis 2 up on the screen, we look at work sometimes through a lens that it's something that is just a merit-based reality. And though there are things we have to do to position ourselves for it, when we're worried about the whole person, one of the realities is we have to be worried about them having the ability to work. So one of the things we've often found ourselves doing is being advocate for people who may have been incarcerated, for example. And because of their incarceration, they have found themselves in a position where it's incredibly difficult to find gainful employment. It's one thing to find employment where you can find something that is incredibly limited in its income. It's another thing to find employment that allows you to take care of yourself. So all of us are familiar that there are a lot of working poor, and some of that is the result of some things like I just mentioned, where there's incarceration. Some of that is the result of undereducation. Some of that is the result of other systems that have just made it difficult for some people in an employment sense. But when we remember as the church that this is part of God's design, therefore I'm always trying to play a role as an advocate and as a body of Christ, trying to encourage people to develop in a way that puts them in position to have the best gainful employment out there. Work has benefits, and we all know it from the standpoint of finances. Of course, that's the most obvious, but there are other benefits that come from work. You get to see personal purpose. People find so much identity and value that comes with it. And it has so many things that build my self-esteem or my self-confidence up. Personal achievement, where you actually get to see that you're capable of doing some things. It builds expertise that people don't always have that gets to be transferred to other people. The family, for example, is the biggest benefactor, in my opinion, when you start talking about the context we're in, because so many families on the margins find themselves in cyclical poverty, all surrounding this issue of underemployment, this issue of not being able to have work that allows them to make gainful incomes. So trying to deal with the cycles from an education standpoint that then affects the employment standpoint in the future is part of what CCD realizes is still part of the work of God, because I want to help move you down the continuum so you can be able to take care of your family and break the cycle. I know a lot of people, including myself, that broke cyclical poverty as a result of getting certain education that opened doors for employment that was different than what the generation right ahead of me had. That's a big part of the ministry aspect of CCD.
I'm not sure if you hit community, but man, uh, development of the person in terms of this work ethic and providing opportunities for skill sets to be developed so that they can actually be productive citizens of their community. It helps the whole community begin to process getting whole, because now you have people that are living in the community and contributing to the community's well-being, because they are now allowed to work and provide for themselves. They have personal purpose. They have a sense of achievement. So it kind of is a full circle when you really look at the benefits of work.
And I would add into this that the reality is, for us in the church, sometimes we don't see this as part of the work of the kingdom. And I look back and I read Exodus 36. And in Exodus 36, God is talking to Moses about a group of men that he gave specific skill to accomplish specific work that was related to the temple, but the skill and the abilities were God given. It's all it's talking about here is work, but it's in the midst of the scriptures. So Exodus 36:1 is a reference point. We didn't put it on the screen, but just look at that, because that's important for us to realize it, because sometimes we think that's not part of the kingdom. And I would argue it absolutely is part of the kingdom, because God made work prior to the fall.
We are now going to look at the local church and how the local church can participate in the development of people in the community. And we always like to say, like, much of this is very targeted toward underserved and under-resourced communities, right? But really, community development is something that should be happening no matter what community you come from. Um, I need to be participating, even if I am in a well to do community. What does it mean for me to be a believer in my community, helping to develop that community that I live in? But in this sense, we are really targeting that underserved and under-resourced community, like the one that we do ministry in. And so the first practical is really looking at this verse of First Thessalonians chapter 2 and 8. We use that as our the verse in our own ministry that we kind of hang our hat on in terms of why do we do what we do. And that verse says, we loved you so much that we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well. Why? Because you in this community have become so dear to us. And so the first part of practical engagement, I believe, for the church is you need to be a listener. You need to go into that community. You need to go into that school, that organization, talking less, listening more. It is important to listen to the people and the stakeholders that live in that community. If you're going to do development well, Christian community development well, then you have to be a listener. You have to understand from the people, from the administration, from the organization, what are the felt needs in that community? What are the felt needs in that school? Um, so often, the church will bring to the community what they deem important or what they want to do without ever talking to those that live in the community. I'll give an example and then we'll move to learn. Again, we're located right here in Third Ward, and so many times we get contacted by churches asking, can they bring their church group to our center to volunteer? And oftentimes the church approach us with very specific things that they want to do at our community center. And the majority of the time, what they want to do is not what we need. And so we have to balance this tension of helping the church understand it would be good if you come to us first and listen to what our needs are. We may not need crafts. We may need food. Our parents may not need food. They may need um, understanding of how to connect to resources to get GEDs or to navigate the HISD school system for their kids, right? And so development starts practically with coming in and being a listener.
I think the other part of that, of being a listener, is to learn, just to come into a culture. I think part of the challenge for all of us is that we bring our own culture with us, we bring our own customs with us, but to come into the community, especially if you are not of the community. Now, when we moved to Houston, we moved into the community. So we live in the community we work in. But even moving into the community didn't mean we understood the community. We just start living here, and we just start getting to know our neighbors and getting to understand the culture and the customs of the area. I think it's important for us to recognize anytime we come into a new space that that's important for us to do, because every community has its own culture, and whether that culture is healthy or unhealthy isn't the point. The point is there are dynamics there that we have to understand so we can be more effective at trying to minister to those people. I also think it's important for us not to ever think that we're trying to change culture. I say this purposely because I see so many times when we do have churches that visit us, they want to come in and they want to deliver something in a particular way. And what they lose out on is the place of culture and to validate culture that is already pre-existing. When I look at scripture, I never see Jesus focusing on changing culture. In fact, the Bible makes it clear because it describes him as Jesus of Nazareth. It tells us that through that phrase, Jesus of Nazareth, that he was associated and affiliated with an impoverished area. But even when he was ministering from his own dynamic, he was ministering to people across all the cultures that he came in contact with. He wasn't trying to change their culture. He was trying to change them from the inside out. So it's important for us to look at that when we come in to a community, that there are things we learn and understand so we can see and be able to laugh and enjoy culture. I'm not from the Third Ward, so I'm not from Jack Yates. I come over here and I start learning about Jack Yates, and so I can celebrate. I got a lot of friends that graduated from Jack Yates in the 60s and 70s, and we talk and laugh about certain things, but it was on me to learn about the culture of the community without trying to change it. So the last thing I will share on this is that there is some practical things that we think that makes it easier for a church to engage, particularly with a school. You know, some of you may be doing more than just with a school, but particularly with a school, when you start talking about partnership, if you're listening and you're learning and you're building bridges with the administration at that school, then they will help you understand some of the needs that exist in that school. Tutoring is the obvious thing that most schools need. Our local school has asked us to assist them by sending some of our staff on field trips with them. We've done classroom assistance where we had a program in the school called Encourages, where we were in the school on a weekly basis working with the same students. Family intervention, where the school, as they get more comfortable with you, they may ask you to go in as the church and do something that they're uncomfortable with approaching the family with. We've been asked to do that with multiple students with our local elementary school. Of course, there's classroom helper, and all of these things give you the ability to be discovered as you interact with the school. One of the last things I put on here, we used to run a training out of here, and that training is still available. Bridge Builders was really trying to help churches understand how to be more impactful when they went into these kind of contexts. So it's a practical step we still encourage churches to look at, because at the end of the day, what we want to be is most effective when we go in any context, hoping to minister and encourage people.
Thank you guys so much. That was very helpful. And I particularly am grateful that you mentioned work. And I wanted to ask, this is our time for question and answer. And so as you guys may be thinking about questions and answers, I want to ask you both, since you talked about work and you talked about how important it is for a person to work and all the things that come along when a person has work, the fact they're able to take care of themselves and their families, they have higher self-esteem and feel valued. Are we hurting when we're providing relief in situations where maybe it'd be more helpful to help somebody get a job?
I think that part of the challenge in that arena, because relief is real and it's needed, and there are a number of circumstances and situations that it is. In fact, what we've discovered in our ministry is that a lot of the people that we help have jobs. They're just the working poor. So they can't afford, when the winter storm comes, not to go to work because they work in a local parking garage, and all of a sudden they're not getting that $12 an hour. Mm-hmm. And so it's not on it, but their landlord is still expecting that rent. They still need food. So yes, I think there's a time and place where you can hurt people, but a lot of people we're talking about in some circumstances absolutely are working. I have a mother who has a college degree and she's married, and between the two of them, still they're living check to check. They both work. So yes, we want work, but this part of why when we talk about being concerned with a person holistically, you break the cycle of poverty as you help people begin to expand what they can do in work, in the sense of making gainful work movement. So you're not always on the margins of being in poverty, because that's a reality for a lot of the families we serve, and it's not because they, one, don't work, or two, they haven't gotten educations.
I think another caveat to that is let's take the church food pantry, where people come and they get food weekly or bi-weekly. That's traditionally, it's giveaway, and the person is just a recipient. How can I bring dignity to that family by partnering them in with what they're getting, by requiring that they come and volunteer, require that they come set up with us, help bag? That, therefore, man, not only am I getting my felt needs met, my needs met, but I'm also working and contributing to something. So I have a sense of, I'm not just getting this free, I'm actually contributing to what I'm receiving. We do that with our families. There's at times some of our families cannot afford to pay the small tuition that we charge. So what we do in exchange for money, you get to come and volunteer. You get paid $15 an hour. That payment goes to your tuition, and therefore it's not, I didn't just give you something, you actually worked for what you received.
I love that. That's awesome. 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 Thank you so much. And I know many people on this call do things like food pantries and clothing drives and school supply giveaways. And so it's helpful for us to think through, well, how can we how can we include dignity? How can that even be a thought on our minds, that we're mindful to give people the opportunity to work and to earn these things. And so those were both very helpful answers.
We had a question from Adam. He's asking, how do you redirect churches that come in with their own agenda?
Ooh, that's good. Dana, answer.
Typically, it depends on, I will say it starts with depending on the depth of relationship we have with that church to begin with. Because the more relationship we have, the more we can help them see how, if they really want to help us, we may be looking at some other things. Now, if this is just some church, another part of the country that's heard about us, and we still would like to build a relationship with them, we start trying to help them think through what they're trying to do and then how that can fit into helping us, actually how it helps. But the biggest thing is, I would say, the level of relationship. The churches that, like, let's take the local churches in Houston that we know that support us, that partner with us. We can talk to them and really help them see, at the end of the day, if you're trying to help us, these are the things that will help us. Now, if you're trying to do this because you're trying to give your seventh graders this experience, that's a different thing. But if you're really trying to help us, these are the things that would help us. So I say relationship plays a big part in what you can do with that.
And I would add just real quickly, because I'm the program director that usually gets hit with trying to figure out if it will work. Dana and our development director has really gotten good at saying, honestly, no, that will not work for us. This can work, but this won't work. And I think the organizations or schools, that you have to feel some type of empowerment to finally say that doesn't fit into what we do, and let's redirect. Yes, we would love to have you, but this is the capacity that we could have you in.
Yeah, thank you. All right, I'm going to move to the next question, which was, how can churches help their community find meaningful work?
Well, as I think about it, I think the church has a built-in network in it. So membership is a starting place when you start saying, how can a church play a role? Depending on what community a church is in and what resources it already has in the sense of its people capacity, there are already people who have networks that can introduce people to people. One of the things that we've always done is use our network to introduce people to people in the sense of trying to provide them employment opportunities. We even do that with our students, because we take our senior high students that's in our leadership development program, we take them into these people's corporate spaces, partly to expose them to, early on while they're still in school, what were the academic strengths and weaknesses of those folks doing those jobs. And I even asked those people to talk about their compensation, because we want our kids to hear this, to get from here to here took this. So it helps them connect the dots on how their education matters while they're in school. But I would say a lot of it, when somebody's out of school, it depends on who we know and who we can introduce to them to, that would at least give them a good, honest look as a potential employee.
And also using the church, connecting to the local organization that has boots on the ground, that know the needs of the people that they serve. And when opportunities come up, then we could connect back and forth with the church. So this partnership with the church, where we know a family has a mom. I have a mom right now. She has a degree and she cannot stay employed because of the degree, and the demand is not there. And so with the church and the organization partnering, the organization can go to that church and say, hey, there's a mom that here's what her skills are. If you hear of anything, we have one that has been in our program that's served well, and she would do well with within another organization in terms of employment. So I think that partnership becomes super important.
And let me add on, recently I got a phone call from a local pastor. Many of you know David Hill. David Hill called me up. We minister in the same community. One of his supporters is starting a business relatively close to us. He wanted to hire a parent from within our context. David called me up, put it in front of me. As it turns out, there was a parent immediately in my mind because I had met with her recently, her kids in my basketball program, but David knows the family as well. I said, hey, why don't you call so-and-so? Mm-hmm. He called her, they interviewed her. She's now employed at that place. And that's how that network worked, where it just so happened I had a conversation with her recently. David wouldn't have thought about it, even though he knew her. But she's now working for that business person who wanted to find somebody through our ministry network.
That's awesome. Thank you, guys. And I know that there are some other programs that churches often rely on when they want to engage in meaningful work. So like providing a job training session through the Chalmers Center or Work Life or Workforce Solutions. So y'all think those are good ones?
Yes, yes.
Awesome. I have another question here about collaboration. I think sometimes we see churches getting a little competitive in serving their community. Can you speak just in a couple minutes? What is your ideal for churches collaborating together to serve the community?
Yeah, we probably are the other extreme where we work with everybody and their mama that we can. So I'm a transplant to Houston, only been here, I'm in my 8th year, and I am probably as visibly recognized as any minister on staff at Good Hope, other than DZ Cofield, because I'm over there always trying to pull something out that church to work with. When we got here, we started working with the local churches that would work with us. One of them was City of Refuge when Icky was over there. We just think it's vital because not one of us have all the resources of all the people. So it was a matter of how much more can we get done together versus who's going to get the credit for it. So it's been easy for us because we're really about our families. This is about, man, who can we work with to help this family move down the continuum? Because again, what we're talking about is them really fulfilling the capacity that's God-given. This is their formation. Now, of course, we play a role in their spiritual formation, even though we're not a church, because we have so much access to them and their kids. But we are not the church, and we always emphasize that to them. So we want them connected to one of the local churches. So it helps us hold up the local churches in our community, even though I can do everything that the local pastor can do because of my credentials. We think it's vital. So,
amen.
I think for churches just to simply understand that there is plenty of work and usually not enough laborers. And so we're all competing for the same thing, really, to make people whole, to give people dignity, to come alongside and do reconciliation that would be people to people, people to God, people to their community, their families. And so I think it has to be a shift in thinking for the church that you're not in competition, because there are plenty of opportunities all across the city, wherever you live. So I think it's a switch in thinking that has to take place.
Amen.
Is Pastor Leon still on here?
Yes, yes. we have it's called an iWork Hiring Expo. And it's going to be April 28th through the 29th, and it's designed to provide hope, build community, and connect job seekers with long-term employment. And so it's going to be virtually. So we've done it the last several years, and you can get more information. You can go to houstonsfirst.org to just get all the information about it. It'll be on that Wednesday and that Thursday.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing.
All right, you're welcome.
Awesome. Yes, I could ask one more question. You guys talked about being in a posture of listening. And so if a church realizes they haven't been doing a good job listening to their community, what are some public community spaces they can start listening?
I think the local school is always going to have a pulse on what's happening in the community because they get exposure to so many kiddos and they see it. Like for now, we are operating as a all-day school, remotely distant learning, and we see their kids and they talk and we know what's happening in homes because we have those kids for 10 hours a day. And so I think the first place is you reach out to the administrator at the school. And then I think the churches in communities, those pastors, local pastors, they know what's going on in their communities. And then I think a third place would be the community nonprofit organizations that have boots on the ground in the community. They know that because they're connected to the community, they know what's going on in the community. And you get to sit with that ED, you get to sit with that pastor, you get to sit with that school leader. And that right there, that's a starting point that's pretty big. Because they're all connected to the community and there's trust level already built within the community with all of those entities that then when you come in as a church, if you're partnering with those three places, then you begin to build some credibility in the community as well.
And I would add that if you're a church that's already been present in the community, in other words, you're not coming into the community there, maybe change the leadership, or just change your philosophy. Sometimes I think there's value in surveys and getting out and interviewing people. Because sometimes when you do that, you'll get a chance to get how you're perceived from those who are around. How do they view that church over there, big or small? How do they view that congregation over there? Do they feel that church is welcoming? Do they feel that church is concerned about the community? All of those kind of things start to help us look at how are we perceived. But I mean, one of the ways you get that kind of feedback is by asking the people. So certainly one of the things we talk about when we're talking about do you do something around here is there a demand for it? In other words, do we just want to do it, or are people coming to us, knocking on our door, asking us over and over? I have a new consideration for programs, which, by the way, my program director has yet to hear about, because I continue to get phone calls from people in the community, particularly about space with seniors. I've had a half dozen calls about this particular age group, and it was like, okay, the first two calls, we don't really do anything. And by the third call, I'm like, God, are you trying to tell us something? So it's one of those things that I realized, man, we need to look at, what's going on in our neighborhood for this age group? And should we be looking at playing any role in that?
Amen. Well, thank you both so much for sharing and answering questions. I think your answer just then, Bridget, really affirmed what people on the call are doing in schools, and definitely wanting to tap into the relationships that we have there. And I'm also hearing the strong push to not only just stay on the school, but to collaborate with other nonprofit organizations who could also come and support your church and serve the school that you're in. So appreciate you guys. Thank you both so much.